Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for another NetHope Solution Center webinar. Today our topic is creating a thriving digital culture for nonprofits, virtual culture and leadership. And today we welcome presenters from Accenture, Fingo or Finnish Development NGOs, and Triggerize. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping guidelines for today's session. Please keep this session interactive. Post your comments and questions in the Zoom chat window for our Q&A session toward the end of the hour. Also later today, please look for a follow-up email with a link to the recording for this session and collateral from the slides and the presentation on the NetHope Solution Center. And we would like you to please take a moment at the end of the session to complete our webinar satisfaction poll. Your input is very important to us, and we appreciate any feedback that you have to give us. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Terry Michaela is the Talent and Organization Director at Accenture. Richard Matakanya is Chief Operating Officer at Triggerize. Paulina Paananen is the Learning Specialist with Fingo. And Anu Haranan is Accenture Development Partnerships Consultant and Corporate Citizenship with Accenture. And with that, I will hand it off to Anu to begin our presentation for today.
Great, thank you. So just a moment, please. Excellent, and you're able to see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So just as a reminder, this is part of a webinar series. This is a part one focusing on virtual culture and effective leaders for a remote workforce. And the second part of the webinar series is coming up on July 9th. And it's all about engaging and impactful virtual workshops. And welcome to the session on Accenture's behalf. The content is focusing on virtual work, and it's part of the playbook that we prepared this spring for nonprofits to support in the new situation, but also very relevant going forward. And let's have a look at our agenda today. After introduction, we'll focus on high-performing virtual teams and thriving culture. And we have excellent case experiences from Fingo and Triggerize. And at the later part of the session, we'll focus on leadership and building trust as a virtual leader. And we have the Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to type in your questions throughout the session. But before we start, we would love to hear from you. So let's go to menti.com. So feel free to pick up your mobile phone or your browser and go to menti.com and use the code 338647. So Terhi, would you like to facilitate the Mentimeter?
Absolutely, thanks, Anu. So we are getting already some of you joining us at Menti. So great to see those hearts jumping up on the screen. You can log yourself into Menti with any device on your tablet or your mobile phone or the browser on your laptop. So whichever suits you best, feel free to join. It's fully anonymous, whatever you type into Menti, so it's not logged into your identity in any way. We use Menti today just to make sure that we understand who we are here today. I think it's great to see soon where do we come from and so on. And it's hopefully helping all of us to feel that we're doing this together. As Anu and Madeleine was sharing in the beginning, we definitely want to hear from you. So put your comments and your questions on the chat, and we'll get back to those throughout or at the end of the session. But yeah, we're having already more than 50 people joining at Menti. So Anu, could you please go on the next one and let's take a look on where we are. So now we lost the Menti from the screen a bit. So if you'll just share the Menti back. Thank you very much. All right. So many of you are typing in your locations already. So let us know where we come from. We are 80 in the call today, and the larger you see the country or the city mentioned on the map, that's where you have more people coming from. So the font size is representing the number of people coming from that specific country. So most of us are coming from the USA, quite a few coming from England as well, and Canada, Kenya, and a lot of us coming from different places. We have a couple people joining from Switzerland, from South Africa, Jordan, Ukraine, Madagascar, Netherlands. Wonderful community across the world. That's great. So truly coming together from different parts of the globe today. That's wonderful. Let's hop to the next one. And here we'd like to ask you how you felt throughout the past couple of weeks and months. It's been quite a different spring this year, and we'd like to ask you, how has the remote working impacted different parts of your life? Has it have an increase or a decrease effect on your work productivity? What about your mental well-being or your physical well-being? Have you felt about sense of belonging with your team, or has it impacted your motivation? And the last one, tapping into the work-life balance. So you have a scale from 1 to 5 that you can click, and when you submit your response, then you see these averages and the scales showing up on the screen. Or more than 20 people already have responded and submitted your own responses for these questions. So we see that the impact on your work productivity has actually increased or improved. So many of us actually are able to work quite well in a remote world, so to say. So that's actually really nice, because we didn't really have an option. This was a global thing, pulling teams together, and that's how I felt when we all needed to work remotely. And when I was working with my team located in Australia, India, and New York, and myself being in Finland, it really felt that that's something that we're experiencing together, and still we were able to work together nicely, which is wonderful. But it has had some impact on your mental and physical well-being. Not that much though, but sense of belonging, maybe that's or the mental well-being and physical well-being impact has been more on the negative side, and then the sense of belonging is somewhere in the middle. Motivation maybe a little bit on the positive side. Yeah, well, this is interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. The next question then is about what's your vision for 2021? If you fast forward to next year, how it's gonna look like for you? What do you think? So let us know whether you think that you'll mainly do face-to-face interaction next year, or if you think that some days will be remote and others then more physically together with the teams, or you don't have any clue, or somewhere in between. So what are your thoughts on this? At the moment, most of us are thinking that as much as possible remotely. There are many upsides on that. I've discussed with my teams being really happy about not burdening the environment, not flying around, not even using the car. I personally haven't pumped up, got more gasoline for just a little bit during the spring, because I haven't been really using my car. I've been cycling and walking a lot around the areas where I live. So I guess this is something that we can definitely learn from, and maybe then in the next normal, whatever that is, prioritize those face-to-face sessions only when we need to really be physically in the same place. Let's have the last one. So what do you think? What type of support for the remote working is important to you? So would you need more support in terms of flexible working times, or is it more towards the leadership elements that you'd like to have them showing the best practices and then you can follow their lead, or better tools and systems, maybe some updates on the existing technology and ways of working and schedules and so on, or something else? So how does that feel from your perspective? The leadership, walking the talk clearly is something that many of us feel that's the thing, and flexible working times so that we can balance whatever needs there are, for example, regarding our families or our communities. Yeah, but basically what I see here is that we need a lot of support, different types of support from our leaders and our peers, our communities, and our teammates to be able to work in this remote world. All right, very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Annu, let's go then back to the slides and learn a little bit about virtual cultures and leadership.
Excellent, thank you, and great to hear your input. So thank you a lot. Before we go to our case experiences, let's have a look at how do we define actually a high-performing virtual team and what is a thriving culture. So based on Accenture research, we found these 5 elements as the characteristics of high-performing teams. So we see that high-performing teams have a common vision and direction and a purpose. And team members also know how their task and work links to the common vision. They also know what is expected of them. And of course, great teams have the abilities then to perform on the expected level, meaning skills and resources and capabilities and tools. But high-performing teams also, instead of just focusing on the task at hand and surviving at this situation, great teams also are building skills for the future. So how do we survive not just now, but also then in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years from now? And based on the research, we've also noticed that great teams have diverse people from diverse backgrounds, and people are able to also state their diverse opinions. And we've also noticed that positive energy at work is highly crucial for high-performing teams. For example, based on our research from hundreds of transformation programs, we've noticed that teams where there's a lot of positive feelings such as passion and drive towards the work, they perform better than the teams where there are, for example, negative feelings such as fear and frustration available. So this is very interesting, and when we are looking into team building and culture in a virtual setting, we are of course looking into how do we build an environment where these 5 elements are present. So how do we communicate the vision, and how do we support our teams to perform on the expected level, and how do we build their skills also for the future? And also very important point is that in a virtual setting, how do we make the environment so that people are able to state their diverse opinions? And when the people are not in the same room, so how do we foster the positive feelings and the engagement and the sense of belonging to a team? So it's all very interesting. And based on our experience, we have also noticed that there are different types of virtual team members. So of course our capabilities and skills and objectives and motivation varies, and we have some characteristics here described. So for example, we might have in a team an early adopter, Eliza, who loves using the latest collaboration and visual task management tools, and really might not like using email at all, and might even get frustrated if the colleagues or the team members are not trying out the new tools that would help the team to work more efficiently. So how much we then support Eliza, then quite often we see also these reverse mentoring types of initiatives where Eliza could be asked to mentor and teach others and act as a kind of like a virtual collaboration ambassador. And we might have then in a team also a person called unmute Malik. So not all people like to be on the spotlight, especially in a virtual setting. You need to consider the people who might not enjoy speaking in a big conference call or chatting to a wide group of people in a virtual collaboration tool. So so Malik might consider that how should I actually react if I get called out in a meeting or in a team chat. So they might be also concerned that, for example, if I write something in our internal collaboration channel, so it will stay there forever. So is it okay to write something like this? So how to support then Malik? So you might want to make it very low risk to practice virtual teamwork. For example, asking Malik's opinions in a smaller call at first, and then also of course, showing example. It's what is it okay to do in a virtual setting, and then we might have in a team a multitasker, Michael. So a person very interested in efficiency and being productive, and they might try to get as much as things done possible, and they might have a personal to-do list that they don't share with the team, and sometimes they might feel that the team calls or virtual coffee calls also might be disturbing them, and during those calls they might be just replying to their emails and to optimize their efficiency in the workday. And how much you support then multitasker Michael is that, of course, it's very important to highlight the importance of focus on the task at hand and mental well-being, so that your brains actually need the focus in the workday. So you can't just anymore keep replying to the emails if you spent your most of your workday in the course. So, and it's of course very crucial to explain the purpose of all meetings. That, for example, we don't have these team calls just because it's fun, but it's also very important for our collaboration, and to secure the information flow, as we don't have anymore the informal chats by the coffee machine. And then we might have in the team also late adopter Lena. So Lena might be very interested to know how her team members are progressing. So she might have the idea that the best way is to ask the team members to fill in a template in an email and ask to send it back. And she might not then understand the need to constantly change the tools that are being used. So then again, this type of progress tracking might be considered from the team as lack of trust, for example. So how you might support Lena is to support with the tool adoption, for example, asking Eliza to mentor her with the new tools, and also using some visual task management tools. Richard and Trigerize will show some great examples on this later, and then also it's good to explain her the importance of trust, and we will hear about this also from Terhi at the later part of the session. And these are just examples of the types of personas we might see in a team, and how much you support them to perform on the best level possible. And now we will hear also some experiences from our NGO partners. So let's start with Fingo and Pauliina. So go ahead.
Thank you, Annu. Good evening from Helsinki. My name is Pauliina Paananen, and I work at Finnish development NGO's Fingo. Fingo is an NGO platform, and we serve as an umbrella organization for 300 member organizations. And our role is to make our members stronger civil society actors by offering training, advisory services, and opportunities for networking and cooperation. In my presentation, I'm going to share the experiences related to remote work in this COVID-19 situation from a couple of our member organizations, Plan International Finland and FIDA International Finland, and also from our own project, Fingo Power Bank, that supports development NGOs and their partners in East Africa. I interviewed shortly the personnel in charge of projects and asked them about the challenges and adaptation methods and solutions related to remote work and online tools. And all these examples are from African countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Uganda. Our member organizations told me that in the headquarters and bigger country offices, online and remote work is very common, and during the COVID-19 crisis, it has only increased. But in local offices and in the field, the situation is quite different. Before the crisis, there was almost no experience of remote work, and online meetings took place only between Finland and other international partners. And online tools were not used locally or within the country so much, if at all. And also, according to a survey done in Kenya this spring, it states that more than 53% of employees had never worked from home or remotely before the COVID epidemic. But due to the situation, remote work is now increasing, and it's a big change in many countries and projects. And as the headquarters and regional offices are already routine users of digital and remote work tools, so they have also an important role in this development. They set an example to their local offices. However, at the same time, it's also good to keep in mind that this lockdown situation varies a lot from country to country and in different regions within the country, so the change hasn't happened everywhere yet. Next slide, please. The challenges that they have observed when working remotely from home. Especially in African context, one of the greatest challenges seems to be the poor internet connections. There is connectivity limitations and instability, and the network gets easily very loaded. Sometimes their electricity supply is unreliable, and the coverage, network coverage in rural areas can be limited. Also, this situation has caused unplanned costs. For example, mobile data costs have increased. Wireless USB modems have been bought. There's greater need for laptops, which are not very common. And of course, working from home also is a challenge for many people, since there's lack of peaceful environment, and many times there's no separate space for working. Families can be very big, and it's difficult to concentrate on working. And this situation might cause some domestic conflicts. Also, another issue is that less than 50% of the employers have a policy on working remotely. So this is also something that has caused some problems. Next slide, please. But so what are the solutions, and how people have adapted to the situation? there's a couple of examples from FIDA International in Kenya and Tanzania. They say that they have established, for example, WhatsApp groups and started to use virtual platforms. They say that we had to think out of the box and started to use Zoom and Google Meet calls and even give online trainings, which we didn't do before. And we have also developed strategies to activate our employees and project groups. They say that they are using WhatsApp groups with farmers in rural areas and SMS when there are connectivity problems. And then the key contacts spread out the messages to everyone. They say that they still have some connectivity problems with reaching rural area volunteers which do not have internet connections, and also, for example, street kids which cannot be engaged remotely. But they say that they are very busy exploring new ways of addressing challenges, and they've realized that they are all in the same boat in this situation with other NGOs, and they have now much more collaboration with other NGOs, for example, joint COVID-19 messaging, and they are really happy about this situation. They say it's important to have a positive mindset to take advantage of all the digital opportunities and open minds to innovation. They say we can already see the benefits and we will carry these lessons learned forward in the future as well. Another example that I have is from Fingo Power Bank in Kenya. And they say that they have focused on leadership and techniques in working from home. They are using online tracking tools such as Trello, which is a project management application, and Google Doc and Excel. And they find them very useful with weekly deliverables. They have also introduced multi-level scheduled updates for team level and management level. And while introducing these new tools, they've noticed that open communication and trust are the foundation when working remotely. They say that it's very important to let beneficiaries know the new ways of doing things. And when communicating, it's good to think, well, who to contact in the field and how the information is spread among beneficiaries. Then the last example comes from Plan International, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and Uganda. They say that they have introduced new tools and, for example, monthly review meetings, and they are using Teams, and they have these new wireless USB modems. They have made a shift from local office meetings to nationwide meetings, which are also called monthly review meetings. And they have also regional briefings, and they find these very useful. Working from home is challenging, and they have invented this kind of office rotation system. So they take turns when working at office so that everybody gets a couple of days a week at the office with stable internet connection and peaceful working environment. And they say that people are learning very quickly, but it's important to set an example. Final examples that I have are from Plan International Finland, and they say that as they are at the state of emergency in the organization, and it means that all are working for the same goal to fight the COVID-19 virus. So they feel that they are all in the same boat, and they can see changes in work dynamics. There's more cross-team collaboration, co-development, and training. And the flow of information has improved by utilizing various online platforms. and they feel that there is clarity and better interaction between different teams. They have started to use Workplace, which is this internal Facebook-like platform for high priority communication. They say that it's easy to follow and there are links to important documents in SharePoint. And they also organize online discussion events similar to Facebook Live events to share and discuss about important things. And all these measures have improved the democratization of information, meaning that there is better access to information for everyone, more sharing and more communication and less hierarchy since everybody has access to same information. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Great. Thank you very much, Paulina. I just wanted to, before I begin, just to quickly introduce Triggerize. We were established in 2014, and we're essentially a Dutch nonprofit foundation that uses technology and the insights arising from the data of that technology to actually nudge our users. And our key primary target is low-income, socially excluded women. And we focus particularly on young women who are aged 15 to 24. And we use our platform to nudge them to take on behaviors that either improve their health or improve their social well-being. And we work in 10 countries, including the Netherlands, Portugal, where our technology team is actually based, South Africa, Kenya, DRC, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Uganda, USA, and India. And across all of these 10 countries, we are a team of 103 staff and consultants, and we are almost evenly distributed across all of the countries that we operate, with our largest offices being in Kenya, Ethiopia, and DRC. Next slide. So for us, because we're a hybrid organization in which we work with technology, so we have a tech team that's pretty much based in Porto in Portugal, and then we are very operational in terms of humanitarian operations in the countries that we work, where we actually support these young women to be able to take up healthy behaviors, whether it's contraception, sexual and reproductive health, maternal child health, non-communicable diseases, or economic well-being in terms of micro entrepreneurship. We are quite interesting in that particular way. So our technology team, which is based in Porto, and then also in the States and in South Africa, they have been used to working remotely. So they've already built, they managed to build quite a remote culture in terms of how they work and how they deliver their products. And what COVID has done for Triggerize is actually just spared the impetus for us to start thinking very quickly about how to adapt this agile and remote way of working across the entire organization. And essentially what we did was three things. With the support of partners like ADP, we trained all of our leadership and our operational teams in the countries in which we work around agile methodologies and tools. And the picture you see on the right is an application called Asana. It's a project management tool. It's super useful, it's great, and it allows us to be able to manage activities and tasks collaboratively across the different teams that we have. So that's one of the things that we've been using Asana for a while, but we really started exploiting it during this particular period. Then, in order to get our team to start thinking about working agilely, we started actually with COVID. It was the biggest issue. It's still one of the big issues for us. And what we said is, what are we going to do to respond to COVID as an organization? And we started doing those COVID related activities and started working in an agile manner with cross teams across all of the different countries that we work. And when we found that this had been successful, we then cascaded it across all of our teams, and it's now established practice within the organization. So that's been a very quick and rapid change in terms of how we work productively remotely together. Next slide. So basically, obviously, as a result of COVID, we had to adjust our work. We, like a lot of the nonprofits that have been outlined, plan, as Paulina had mentioned, we have a lot of field operations. And what we did initially was to actually suspend all of those operations in order for us to do three things. Firstly, it was just an opportunity for us to immediately protect our employees and consultants on the ground. Secondly, we took that opportunity to understand their needs and also to address anxieties that they had with respect to working in a COVID environment. And also just as an opportunity for us to just pause to develop and implement a response. And what we did to ensure productivity, firstly, was we provided all of our staff and their families with personal protective equipment. So these are masks, sanitizer, gloves, just to ensure that if they needed to go out personally, socially, to the grocery, for instance, and everything else, that they were adequately protected. And it was also not just our staff, because we understand, they all have families. We wanted to make sure that we were protecting everyone in the family, because we knew protecting the family, we were also protecting our staff and our employees. Secondly, we realized that we needed to do this shift towards remote work. And we did an analysis and the diagnostics and a review of all of the productivity suites, and ensured that we provided all of these new tools and applications. So from Zoom subscriptions all the way to virtual flipboards, programming that we could use to collaborate with our staff, and then also providing them with the necessary IT infrastructure. So a lot of the things that Paulina has alluded to before, so modems, we procured broadband subscriptions for staff where broadband capacity was available. And then we also developed protocols in terms of how we expected our staff to be able to work in the field. And then finally, I think the most important part for us was really addressing anxiety and stress. Initial worries among our teams was about, what does that mean for my job? Is my job secure? And I think we had to do a lot of psychological safety counseling. We worked with a number of counselors and outside employee assistance programs, just to ensure that our teams were fully comfortable and that we addressed anxiety and stress management. Next slide. And really around ensuring well-being, what are some of the things that we've actually done and are currently doing? Firstly, every week we do an anonymous pulse survey across the organization just to understand where everyone is mentally, emotionally, and then in terms of productivity. And we use those survey results to continuously iterate and improve the working environment for our team members and staff. Secondly, we've really adapted flexible working schedules. And in that sense, we acknowledge that it's not business as usual. And we know that, everyone needs to manage and support their families. So what that means is for everyone in the office, on their calendars, they set aside the time that they need to be able to address during what are traditional working hours, the family commitments that they might have. So whether it's homeschooling a child, whether it's a relationship with a partner that they need to manage, whether it's exercise that they would usually be able to do, all of this, we allow them to be able to establish those working schedules. And then we really also focus on creating that virtual social intimacy. And how do we do that is essentially about weekly socials. So every week across all of our teams, we get together, whether it's a pub quiz, whether it's a disco, interact together and have virtual coffees and water cooler time. Secondly, we've actually programmed our productivity applications to also nudge our staff to interact. So the program randomly nudges our staff that it has not seen a lot of interaction from to chat, to engage. And also, we've also programmed it to push basic, usual communication that one, for instance, might have on the water cooler. How's the weather? How are things doing? What do you think of football? And so forth. So that's also what we've embedded in our tools and our software. Secondly, we've also paid for co-working space for those that are not able to work from home. So, we did an assessment looking at personal hygiene standards of all of the co-working spaces in the 10 countries in which we operate. And what we've done is we've allocated subscriptions for those staff to be able to get into a co-working space and work where they are. And then finally, we've also focused on supporting very basic well-being subscriptions. So whether it's app-based well-being subscriptions, such as Calm, for instance, or whether it's other subscriptions over the phone. We partner, for instance, with organizations like Inuka that do virtual counseling, just in case any of our staff need to be able to speak to someone about any particular stresses that they might have. Next slide. And really for us, it's really been about leadership. And because we understand the importance of it, we quickly set up a working committee in terms of how we respond that manages our remote working approach, methodology, tools. It's centralized. We also freed up resources in terms of staff to be able to make a lot of this collaboration happen. And essentially, because we used to do quite a lot of traveling across all of the countries in terms of support, so we converted those resources to be able to procure the IT infrastructure and the equipment that our staff needed to be able to undertake their work. And then we also do quite regular check-ins. We do a town hall in which all of our 103 staff are able to communicate with us and share and provide their inputs around any issues that they may have that affects their ability to do work, to meet targets and to deliver. And finally, we've also just set the tone. So basically, when my staff look at my calendar, they see that I've already set, and I'm very clear, I set that time on my calendar, very clear, saying, this is about my family time, and, we respect that particular opportunity that I'm doing that. And that's the expectation that cascades across the entire organization. So we have set the tone as management, just to make sure that everyone's comfortable, that we know it's business as usual, and that we support them. And what that has also really meant for us is a change of how we engage with our team members. Very much open communication with empathy. It's about the head, the heart, and the hands in terms of the conversations that we've had. And essentially, we understand that COVID has really created opportunity. It's stress test the organizations. Some of our team members have been able to really adapt very quickly to remote ways of working. Others have had difficulties and challenges around adapting to remote ways of working. And what we've done is really taken a very empathetic approach to getting them there, to providing them all of the support that they need to make this very swift and rapid change in terms of work. For us, in the long term now, we have pretty much, I think, made a decision that we are going to be an almost 80% remote organization now going forward in terms of how we do work. And we're looking to really apply that shift in the long term. We've realized that there has been meetings that we've been going to that were potentially not necessary now. That's what we've learned from COVID and the work and the limitations and constraints that it has placed on our operations and our business. We've realized that only the most essential physical interactions need to be made, and we are restructuring how we work with our teams, how we collaborate, how we do meetings to follow this agenda and to make this strategic shift. It has been a very interesting journey for us, and I think the key issue in terms of how we've been able to rapidly adapt has really been about the leadership making sure that we've availed all of the resources, that we have listened, and that we continuously listen to our employees and support them to be able to adapt and make the changes that they need to be able to be more productive, that we've provided them with the resources of technology that they needed to be able to do their work, and that we're always there. And we take a family approach to how we interact with our teams, because we know that COVID, does not just affect individuals, it affects families. And this family approach, I think, is what's really built a lot of organizational resilience within our teams in the different operations that we work in. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Richard, very much. All right, so we are having the last piece of information gathered around trust and psychological safety. These themes are actually very much on the agenda if we look at the articles and all the discussion and dialogue going around COVID. So how can we help our organizations, our communities build that trust, and also in the virtual, and specifically in the virtual working mode, how can we be virtual leaders? And there are actually 3 dimensions to it when we have investigated it. First of all, these 2 purple boxes on top of the slide, leaders are expected to show compassion and true and genuine care to the people in that organization. And on top of that, also we, as members of any community, we want to have a sense of purpose, and we want to see how our leaders help us to navigate to the future. But keeping these 2 things in mind, there are 3 layers of needs that we as individuals have. And if we start from the bottom of it, the physical needs, it's like a Maslow hierarchy. So first you need to have the physical needs in place, like Richard was saying about having the productive equipment available, for having the masks and all that available to make sure that our people are healthy and able to work in a safe environment. So those are the physical needs that we all have. When those are taken care of, then we can start thinking about the mental needs and how to build that psychological resilience. And only after that is covered, we can think then more on the relationship side and how we are connected with our colleagues and our friends and so on, and how we have that sense of belonging in place. On the following slides, I have very practical examples of each of these layers of trust. So Anno, if you'll move on to the next one, please. Again, if we start from the bottom, from these physical needs, what that means is that I feel that I'm empowered to take the responsibility of my own health and well-being, as well as my family and my people close to me. It means that I need to feel safe to work and go to my workplace. And now when the lockdowns are in some countries closed, and we have the possibility to start meeting each other more in some countries, that's really important to still feel safe to do that. On the mental needs side, it means that I have a permission to work differently, so that my needs are taken care of, that if I don't feel safe to come to the office, is it still possible to stay remotely working, or if I have other needs that help me feel well and healthy and safe and productive, then those are taken care of by my employer. On the mental health side, if I've really been struggling throughout these special times, if I have had challenges within my family or in my community, then those are taken into consideration as well, so that I can be a good colleague at work, but in my terms. and any other ways that help me to build the resilience. On the top layer, we have the relationship needs, and how that comes up then is that when a person feels that I'm connected to the mission and to the purpose of the organization that I work for, that gives me that sense of belonging, that I know I'm here, why I'm here, and why I'm working for towards these goals that we have within my team, for example. And along with that comes also the tools and the ways of working. So how, like Paulina and Richard both were sharing, that this is changing the behaviors in the organizations, what we are experiencing globally together, and how we can learn from that and not get back to the old, but rather take the learnings and find new ways of working and connecting and co-creating together in this new reality, which is very often virtual. On the third slide, I actually have some very practical tips for leaders, and you will have the materials, so I won't go these through one by one, but just wanted to highlight a couple of ones. On the left-hand side, at the bottom, you see a tip around hierarchy. So we've found that in terms of building trust, when we can let go the hierarchy and just be very transparent and include people, no matter which position, title, level in the organization they represent, that helps us build trust and work much more productively and effectively together. On the right-hand side, I want to highlight at the first one that the feeling of having meaningful work, having purpose in what I do, that should be embedded in all communication and all initiatives that leaders and organization tap into, so that it's not something that is only presented as a one-slider on the beginning of a presentation by the leader of the organization. It's not something that is just words on the posters on the walls of in an office, but it's in how we act, how we communicate, how we share, how we treat each other in everyday situations. My favorite one maybe is the second on the right-hand side, telling a story, not just sharing data. So by sharing the stories, you actually make people feel something, and that they will stick with, that they will remember. So instead of just giving numbers of how we've been able to help people get better access to healthcare or improve the level of education in some countries, when it's put into a story of how it really meant for a specific village or community or a group of people, that will stick with us and we will remember that much better. I want to end the slide with the last one, which is, I think, giving us some hope also. So let's not let this crisis and this very difficult time that we've experienced globally together stop us from moving towards whatever is in front of us. So let's use this crisis and learn from it and help us improve the way we work and the way we collaborate across the globe in the future. With that, I'd like to actually pass the torch to Anu and NetHub for the questions and answers.
So, thank you, all of you. This is Frederick Winsness. I'll be doing some of the Q&A, but Anu, please jump in as well. There's been a lot of very, very beefy and good questions asked, and we're probably going to run out of time before we get them all covered. A practical question to beginning was if the Mentimeter survey results could be made available, and the answer to that is yes. We will provide that links to those results on the webinar page that we have, and also send it out in the follow-up email. So the first question that came in, and it was probably for Paulina, and the question was, is a report that will be shared based on Fingo's research?
Yes, unfortunately, there's no report. I personally interviewed the personnel of our member organization, so there's no written report to share. We also used some figures from a report made in Kenya, this Human Resource Report 2020, made by Corporate Staffing Services. But other than that, I don't have any written report.
Okay, I do have a quick follow-up question for you, and that was, it seems that access to equipment may be a challenge in many cases, particularly with beneficiaries. Do you see people sharing equipment, like families sharing or friends, you mentioned street kids, or may this create other issues around privacy?
Yes, it's an interesting question, but I don't have any facts about this. I don't know about the practices on sharing equipment, but of course it's possible, and I would see, for example, that laptops are equipment that you could share with between, at least in a family, or maybe between some work colleagues. I don't know.
I can jump in and answer that question. What we've seen organizations do, some do allow sharing of equipment, but when they do allow sharing of equipment, due to data security and privacy issues, they've set up separate profiles. So for instance, there's a profile on the laptop for the person that's the employee, and then other profiles that don't have access to specific folders or sections within the computer. As far as mobile phone is concerned, some NGOs put master data management, or sort of put a security layer on top of the phones if they are provided by the organization. That's different if you're just providing a SIM, but if you're actually providing a physical phone. So those are some of the things that some of the NGOs are doing.
Excellent. So there are several more questions for Paulina, but let's move to a question for Richard. And thank you very much for answering the question about cost in the chat window. That was very, very insightful. But a question came in earlier about how specifically did you get full organizational buy-in for your agile approach? Did you see any reluctancy to participate, and how did you overcome that?
So I think initially, as I said, I think our technology team that works on our software and our products have been implementing an agile approach for quite a long time now, since our inception. And they have been trying to sell to the operational team and everyone else the utility of that approach and working with that approach. And I think there were some initial challenges that people had around, how do you chunk work into very small tasks and activities? How do you chunk work that's humanitarian, where the variables are not necessarily always going to be the same? It's not like you're making software and you're writing code. How do you do all of these things? And I think that was the initial reluctance that we had in the organization. So what COVID did was actually allow us to be able to do that, because firstly, I think because people were overwhelmed initially by the changes we had to do, the constraints and restrictions to the operational work, that a chunking method where we broke tasks down into smaller, easily achievable activities that everyone could potentially do with in terms of their task and roles, they found that to be very useful. And then I think the second issue was the training. I think that had been a gap. I think initially when we had tried it several years back, that training was provided by our team in Porto, but we were quite fortunate. We started engaging with ADP. The ADP team came in and did some really good, very simple, non-technological based training for initially our senior management and staff, so that we understood it, and then later on for all of our operational teams, so that they understood what it meant, the changes that needed to be made. And then the very big example of let's do a project together and learn from that project in terms of how we can work agilely. And I think that really helped, because we picked up a lot of lessons. And I think there was a question that came in around iterations. Essentially, it took us about 2 to 3 months to get to the stage where now everyone is fully comfortable with an agile way of working, and everyone is comfortable in terms of the tools, the productivity tools that we actually use to be able to work agilely and the processes and rituals that Agile requires in terms of feedback, communication, and collaboration. And I think that's also been really useful because Agile has meant for us a lot of check-in opportunities to find out where everyone is. And that has been really useful in terms of helping to embed this change and move to this Agile approach.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. So before we close out, that's all the questions we had time for. We're going to go back and have a little more fun with the Mentimeter. So if you get back on your phones or get back to Mentimeter as the screen says here. So I'm going to move it or give the floor back to Terhi or Anu. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks. So we just wanted to close the session together with you, sharing some of the themes and thoughts that you got from this session. So it's going to be a word cloud. Again, if there are similar words mentioned multiple times, the font gets bigger. So let's see when you have time now to put some of the thoughts on Menti and submit them. We'll see these words popping up. So some of the themes that you were left with: leadership, trust, agile, family and resilience, leadership getting larger. So that clearly resonated, I guess, across the hour that we spent together. Well-being being one of the big things, and many other themes popping up: inclusivity, care, being insightful, support for one another, well-being getting bigger there. Wonderful to see all these things that you caught from this 1 hour. Thank you very much for sharing this. And I'll leave it back to you then, Madeleine, I guess, to close the session for us today.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you to all of our speakers today, Terry, Richard, Paulina, Anu. This was a great session with very important insights for all of us, so we appreciate you coming and presenting today. And thanks to all the attendees for coming and listening today as well. Please take a moment to complete our webinar satisfaction poll. The link is in the chat window, and you'll receive that in an email later today as well if you can't get to it right now. We'll get to that email later today, and it will include the recording, a link to the recording for this session, as well as the other resources that have been presented. I'm Madeline No with NetHope, and we really appreciate your attendance. Please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.